Hi guys. So today we're going to read Open in Case of Emergency. And this is by Richard Fairgray and Jim Kraft. And Open in Case of Emergency. It was the 29th of February, the day that Zachary J. Warthog found a mysterious box on his doorstep. A finely crafted wooden box with a hinge lid and a handle crank and a label on the side in big red letters that read, open in case of an emergency. Zach took it inside and left it on the counter next to some papier-mâché fruit he'd been painting and half-finished aerobics video. He had breakfast to make. He cooked the bacon and eggs and the toast and the sausage, and the popcorn was just beginning to pop when he realized he didn't have any sugar to sprinkle on top. This was an emergency. So Zach opened up his box, and sure enough, inside it was a fresh packet of sugar. The next day, when Zach was dashing out the door, running late for a light show at the observatory, his shoelace snapped. This was certainly an emergency. He opened his box again. Inside was a brand new unbreakable shoelace in his favorite color. When he missed an episode of his favorite TV show because he spent too long in the bathtub, he looked in the box. Ew. When he couldn't find his sandwich, he looked in the box. When he wasn't sure if he was even when he wasn't sure if he had clean underwear, he looked in the box. When he didn't have any batteries for his new mechanical kite, he looked in the box. When they were out of jam at the supermarket, he looked in the box. When he forgot the name of his brother's eldest child, he looked in the box. Zach's neighbor, Cypress Rhinoceros, found a box on his doorstep too. He took it inside, carefully examining it for a note or a letter, any sign of where it came from, but there was nothing. Cautiously, he put it away in the cupboard in case there was an emergency. That night, a rainstorm hit, flooding the house and soaking through all his carpets. He thought about opening the box. But then he thought better of it. After all, this wasn't an emergency. When the sun came back, he simply hung his carpets out to dry. When the snow got so deep that he couldn't get out of his house, he thought about opening the box. But he simply shoveled the path from his door to the street. After all, this wasn't really an emergency. When he saw a tornado warning on the news, he thought about opening the box. But being the cautious rhinoceros that he was, he instead simply put boards over his windows and packed his most precious things into the basement for safing. After all, this was hardly an emergency. When the tornado tore the roof off his house, Cyrus P. Rhinoceros thought about opening the box. But instead, he simply turned a couch upside down and sheltered himself from the wind. After all, this wasn't a big emergency. And after the tornado came all undone and his house was smashed to smithereens, he thought about opening the box. But instead, he just began to rebuild it piece by piece. After all, this couldn't be the biggest emergency. Meanwhile, next door, Zach decided to look in his box, just in case there were any emergencies he hadn't thought of. But when he went to the rumpus room where he left it, it was nowhere to be seen. Where did it go? He looked all over the house, in the game room, in the attic, in the treehouse. He looked everywhere, but the box was nowhere to be found. This was an emergency! Zach was looking for it in the inflatable pool in his backyard when Cyrus popped his head over the fence to see what was wrong. "It's an emergency!" cried Zach. "I've lost my box." "Oh, I have one of those," said Cyrus. "You can borrow mine if it's an emergency." And Cyrus gave Zach his box, and Zach opened it up. And sure enough, inside was his missing box. The emergency was over. "You know, these things are really useful," said Zach as they went inside for a cup of tea. "They are," said Cyrus. "I haven't actually needed mine." The end. I hope you liked our story today. Open in case of an emergency.